Hello and welcome to my channel, Rhino here. Today I've decided to take a break from creationism and take a look at an older video on gay marriage. I know this video was made before the federal decision to make gay marriage legal everywhere in the US, and it's not as big an issue as it used to be, but I am honestly confused about why anyone would be against gay marriage anyway, so I thought I'd take a look at what the homophobic crowd are saying about it. So let's go!
As the same-sex marriage debate continues throughout our country, in our courts, in our news, in our magazines, throughout our blogs, and in our Facebook and Twitter feeds, we need to pause and ask a simple question.
What right do we have to deny gay people the same privileges that straight people enjoy without having to campaign for them just because they're attracted to people with the same genitalia as them?
What is marriage?
Oh. Well, simply put, it's a social contract that states that these two people will be in a personal, long-term relationship, and that's pretty much it.
The whole debate really boils down to a battle between two different answers to this fundamental question. The traditional definition says that marriage is when a man and a woman vow to give their lives to one another.
Well, that depends very much on which tradition you follow and how far back you go. I mean, traditionally, in most cultures, marriage was actually a contract of ownership of the woman by the man. In some cultures, the man would pay the woman's father to essentially purchase her.
I wish to take Mahana for my wife.
It is hard for a man to give his daughter to another.
I am prepared to pay. How many cows do you wish for Mahana?
In others, the woman's father would pay the man to take her off his hands. Many cultures allowed a man to have as many wives as he wanted or could afford, so traditionally, marriage was not very kind to women and completely ignored homosexuals.
They share in the good times and the bad. They care for each other in sickness. They share in all the everyday things of life, like taking out the garbage or doing the dishes. All of these acts are expressions of love.
Not really. I mean, I take out the garbage and do the dishes because I don't want to live in a dump. It can be a point of contention in a relationship if one partner disproportionately does all the nasty chores, but that doesn't automatically mean that if every little bit of drudgery that comes with maintaining a living area is done willingly without an argument, that it is an act of love.
Yet there's one act above everything else that consummates the marriage, meaning it's the complete and fullest expression of the marital union. The two become one.
Sex. Okay. You do know that's not exclusive to straight people, right?
And their union as one is so real and complete that it can literally bring a third person into their relationship.
I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but a union that is emotionless or meaningless can also bring a child into the world. Reproduction is not a function of marriage. It often does happen within a marriage, but it is not a requirement of marriage. Some people have kids outside of wedlock, and everything often turns out okay for them. Others can be married happily and monogamously for their entire lives without ever having or wanting children. Are you saying that their marriages are meaningless? What I'm trying to say here is that having a child should not be a requirement of a marriage, and should you have a child outside of marriage, you shouldn't riddle yourself with feelings of guilt over it. Just as an example, I know someone who had 3 children with 3 different men. The first was given up for adoption as she had him when she was 16. She gets updates on him occasionally and all seems well with him. The other 2 are living with her and the father of her 3rd child, who has 2 children of his own from a previous relationship. They are a happy, well-functioning family, and they're getting married this summer. I don't think they plan on having any more children. Does this fact have any bearing on their marriage? I don't think so, and if you do think so, then forgive me for saying, you're a douche nozzle.
This new person has the man and woman's marital union permanently stamped into their own body, which consists of half the man's DNA and half of the woman's DNA.
Okay, so when scientists figure out how to produce an embryo with genetic material from 2 partners of the same sex, will you then accept that gay marriage is a good thing? Because that technology is not far off at all. Basically, they use stem cells from each parent and have one turn into a sperm, the other turn into an egg, they fertilize it, and implant the embryo. It's called in vitro gametogenesis, and it's really cool. Does a gay couple's love for each other now count as real and meaningful enough to produce a third life? I know you'll probably say no because it can't happen naturally, but natural does not always mean better. I mean, The technique they use for this could also be used to screen for and potentially eliminate genetic diseases, which is also pretty awesome. Seems a bit superior to the natural random jumbling of mom and dad's genes in a uterus.
Marriage, then, by its very nature, is ordered towards family life, because marital love is life-giving.
Scientific advancement is life-giving, and can provide these life-giving capabilities to same-sex couples. So using your ridiculous definition, same-sex marriage should absolutely be allowed.
New life requires intense nurturing and support, which marriage solves by ensuring both the man and woman will always be there as a father and a mother for any children their union creates.
Except it really doesn't. Divorce happens, often for good reason, and being raised by a divorced couple or a single parent is preferable to being raised in a home where the couple doing the child rearing have a toxic relationship, be they homo or heterosexual. Being raised by two parents in a happy and loving relationship is preferable, but sometimes here in the real world, that's just not possible. And as far as the needing a woman and a man for fatherly and motherly roles, that's just a bunch of nonsense. I'll leave a link in the description to a site that compiled a list of 79 studies on the well-being of children in same-sex households. 75 of them concluded that they did at least as well as their peers, and the 4 that found problems studied children raised mostly by couples in heterosexual relationships where one partner came out as gay, which then caused the breakup of the relationship. So it's really not a good way to find out the impact of being raised from infancy by a gay couple.
Marriage then calls for a total commitment that's both permanent and monogamous, meaning it's solely between these two people forever.
A commitment, yes. Monogamous, not necessarily. I mean, it's possible for some people to have polyamorous relationships without jealousy becoming an issue, and if you can manage that, then good for you. If not, then sure, keep things monogamous. Basically, a marriage should include whatever it takes to keep the couple happy with each other, so if they're both happy in an open or polyamorous relationship, then as adults, that's their decision.
Now, onto the modern definition of marriage, which says that it's not about the total union of man and woman, but instead marriage is a relationship based on emotional intensity.
Well, marriage is often born of emotional intensity, but it's essentially a social contract where you promise to put your relationship first in your life. As anyone who has been married for a while can attest, the emotional intensity will not always be there. The contract is meant as a way to raise the stakes so that it's harder to just drop the relationship, so it can add a measure of stability to your and your partner's life. There is emotional fulfillment to be had from having a long-term relationship, and signing a contract that means both of you intend the relationship to be long-term can add a measure of satisfaction to your relationship. And please note, this has nothing to do with whether or not you have or plan to have children, or whether you are homosexual or a heterosexual couple. Besides which, are you seriously suggesting that having a deep emotional connection is not a good thing to base a long-term relationship on? Would you prefer arranged marriages that are entered into as a form of social maneuvering without regard for the feelings of those getting married?
Under this definition, gender doesn't matter, since two people of the same sex can share intense feelings for one another, just like two people of the opposite sex.
And I have no problem agreeing with that.
Here's why this modern definition of marriage is so radical. When you eliminate the man and woman requirement for marriage, you must eliminate all the other requirements as well.
Why? I mean, father and mother isn't a requirement of your version of traditional marriage anyways, so that one's out the window. Permanent also isn't a requirement of your version of marriage, as divorce is already a thing among straight people. A heterosexual couple can also be polyamorous, so while that kind of is a requirement of the current legal definition of marriage, that wouldn't be a necessary change. I mean, I haven't heard very much about gay rights activists campaigning against laws preventing polygamy, so it seems that most of them just want to get married as couples, just like straight people do. And isn't saying two people the same as saying monogamous? So basically, none of those requirements need change in order to allow same-sex marriage. In fact, now that same-sex marriage is federally legal in the US, it's still basically the same as it was before, except they dropped the arbitrary requirement that both parties have opposite genitalia.
In fact, we're already seeing the early stages of these requirements break down in our culture. Let's take a look at some recent examples that show how the institution of marriage completely unravels under this new modern definition. When striking down traditional marriage law in California, the federal judge said that children do not need to be raised by a male parent and a female parent. The gender of a child's parent is not a factor. The marriage laws in California now teach that the role of mother and father have no unique meaning or distinct value to children.
I didn't realize that laws were supposed to teach us things. But that aside, all you've essentially said here is that according to that judge, same-sex couples should have the same rights as heterosexual couples, which I agree with and is something I've never actually seen a good argument against.
Everything is equal, which means kids don't need a mom and a dad.
Correct. One or the other will do, or two of one and none of the other, or one of each. As mentioned earlier, children from same-sex households do at least as well as their peers, so since no harm will come to the children as a result of the parent's sexual orientation, I don't see the need to restrict children to only be allowed to be raised by heterosexual couples.
They only need generic parents. Other countries are taking additional steps to remove the mother and father roles from culture. In Spain, the terms mother and father on birth certificates have been replaced with what translates to parent A and parent B.
Again, I see no problem with that. Why should fields on a birth certificate form be required to show a heterosexual couple as parents? Why does which genitalia someone is attracted to have anything to do with a birth certificate?
In Canada, an elementary school banned children from celebrating Mother's Day and Father's Day, and instead replaced them with the gender-neutral Family Day.
You didn't cite a source for that, but I think I found what you were talking about. Link to that article in the description. I will agree with you that that was not a great way to handle anything. What should have been done would be to allow the children of gay parents to make a card or craft for both fathers on Father's Day or both mothers on Mother's Day. Not sure why they added the International Day of Families thing when Canada already celebrates Family Day in February. That would be a nice day to do a card for both parents, whether they be hetero or homosexual. I mean, a single mother could make the same complaint about Father's Day, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have reacted the same way. This is an example of the pendulum swinging a bit too far in the direction of inclusiveness, but ultimately it really doesn't matter that much. I mean, the parents were complaining that their children didn't make them little cards at school and were not told when Mother's and Father's Day were. Easy solution, give your kid a calendar. My daughter has a calendar with all the holidays marked on it, and she is often the one to remind me about days like that. She usually makes us cards and presents and things without any teacher having to tell her to do so. I know not everyone's kid will take initiative like that, but if you want a card that badly, you can remind them to do it yourself. It's not going to kill you.
In Scotland, the National Health Service deemed the terms mother and father homophobic and replaced them with carers and guardians.
The article you linked about that was about a pamphlet that had been given out in Scotland to expectant parents for decades. They updated it to use the word partner instead of father. My reaction? Who gives a shit? It makes same-sex partners feel like they're being included, and it does nothing to exclude heterosexual couples, so it does no harm to anyone and makes a small group of people feel a little bit happier. I see no problem with that.
If defining marriage based on gender is bigotry, then it makes sense to treat gender-specific terms like mom and dad as hate speech.
Well, not hate speech, just unnecessarily specific speech when dealing with large groups of diverse people. Like I said, the word partner includes moms and dads in both heterosexual and homosexual relationships, so it can be applicable to anyone regardless of orientation, and it does nothing to harm anyone. Let's be honest here, most homosexual couples probably don't care that much if the pamphlets did say father occasionally. I've known plenty of gay people that think splitting hairs like this is pointless, but it's still a nice gesture to acknowledge that not everyone has the same sexual orientation.
Newsweek reported that there are over 500,000 polyamorous households in the United States.
Okay, so less than 0.5% of the 126 million total households in the United States. Does that make you feel threatened? I'm skipping this part as all he basically says is some people live polyamorously, and some of those who live polyamorously want the laws about marriage to change to allow for polyamory. He doesn't actually make a case as to why polyamory would be a bad thing. He just kind of relies on the fact that most people don't approve. I don't have a problem with polyamorous relationships, and if we can someday figure out a good system of laws to accommodate polyamory, it wouldn't bother me at all. So I think that's all I really need to say on the matter.
If marriage is only about emotion, then these three women have a logical argument. There's no reason why marriage should be restricted to two. That would be discriminating against all polyamorous households.
I agree, except like I said before, marriage isn't always purely about emotion.
Columnist Dan Savage coined the phrase monogamish to describe the open sexual relationship between he and his husband. They're mostly faithful to each other, but allow for the occasional sexual encounter with others outside of their marriage.
Okay, so is this going to be another segment of some people have relationships that are varying degrees of open, and I don't like that, therefore gay marriage is wrong? Because that's all you managed to say in the eliminating the number 2 section.
Dan reasoned that gay male couples are much more likely to be realistic about what men are. A study conducted by San Francisco State University followed 500 gay couples and confirmed that half had sex with someone other than their partner, and their partner was fully aware of it.
Okay. Why does it matter so much to you who these people that aren't you and have nothing to do with you choose to have sex with? Like, really, what's your argument here? That these people shouldn't be allowed to get married because they don't agree with you that sex should be exclusive to married couples? Why? I'm having a hard time following your logic here. Even if your stat there is true, I don't see why it should mean that gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married. It just doesn't follow.
Andrew Sullivan, a prominent same-sex marriage supporter, said that the honesty within these relationships can actually be a good thing and help sustain a lifelong commitment.
And you have a problem with that? Wasn't one of your issues earlier the issue of permanence? So if them having an open relationship can help them keep their relationship permanent, what's the problem?
This means that the act of marriage we currently refer to as adultery should instead be redefined as something good and beneficial for marriage.
If it is discussed in depth by both partners, just running off and sleeping with someone else without permission is bad for the relationship, regardless of the genders of those involved.
If marriage is only about emotional bonds, then why shouldn't any sexual arrangement be acceptable if it helps enhance the couple's feelings for one another?
Good point. Are you going to answer that question at all?
The New York Times ran a story on the wedding of John Pertilla and Carol Ann Riddle.
Just another anecdote, this time about two couples that split up when the man from one fell in love with the woman from the other. I'll save you the story and skip to his point.
If marriage is solely about emotions which can come and go, then why shouldn't marriages come and go as well?
Because, like I said earlier, marriages often do start out with intense emotions, but they are a social contract. The two people in your story probably shouldn't have left their spouses for each other, but I'm not really comfortable passing judgment on them because I don't know the details of their situations. Perhaps there was emotional or physical abuse going on. In that case, would you really want them to stay in and raise children in an abusive relationship? And the way you drew the lines there makes the assumption that they abandoned their children when they did this, which does happen, but was not necessarily the case. Maybe both divorces were amicable, and the parents both had joint custody of the kids. That's how my parents did it when they split. No complicated custody arrangements, stay at dad's house when you want, stay at mom's house when you want. Whatever works best on any given day. And while I was upset when I heard that my father was moving out, I got over it, and I feel like I had a pretty good childhood.
In fact, some are even promoting the idea of marriage becoming like a lease or a contract. Couples only need to seriously commit to each other for a short time period. Then they can decide if they want to renew their contract or find new spouses.
You know, I'm not really sure how I feel about these temporary marriage contracts yet. I don't know enough about them to really have an informed opinion, and I don't know anyone who actually got married under one of them. I'm not sure how common they are. It seems like they're a bit of a fringe idea at the moment.
So, when you boil it all down and cut through all the rhetoric, the true marriage question we have to debate is which one of these definitions should our culture promote and our laws incentivize?
How about the one that is the least discriminatory and is beneficial to more people? The rest of the video is just him quoting people who are in favor of gay marriage as saying that marriage will change for straight people too, which I can kinda see why you might say that, but really if you want a traditional style marriage as a heterosexual couple, there is nothing stopping you from having it. An updated definition of marriage doesn't stop you from having it, but it does allow gay couples to enjoy the same thing should they want to. At the end of the day, I take a bit of a libertarian view on marriage. I don't really think the government should be defining it. Let the individual people decide what marriage means to them, and find a partner or partners who agree with them and get married however they like. The only thing that should really matter in a legal sense are the tax and inheritance laws, which are simple enough for couples because we already have them there, but I do agree that some thought would need to be put into how it would work for polyamorous relationships. So that's it for today. Remember to follow me on Twitter and support me on Patreon. See you next time.